Welcome to Washington. I am Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Two big meetings in the Oval Office, but just one of them today before the cameras.
We have many people that feel they're being persecuted and they're coming to the United States. So we take from many locations if we feel there's persecution or genocide going on.
I would say if there was Afrikaner farmer genocide, I can bet you these three gentlemen would not be here.
So here are four of the big stories we are following tonight in and around the Hill at this hour. The Oval debate. You just heard some of it there, playing out before the cameras for about an hour. President Trump and the head of South Africa. Why the president actually, at one point in time, I'd never seen this before, why he brought out videos in the Oval Office to try to make his point. And then behind closed doors, those two and others, I guess you could call it the big, beautiful debate. Republicans are not yet fully supporting the president's campaign promises. Where the fate of tax cuts now stands at this very moment. Also tonight, the former president and his health. Why a big-name Democratic candidate is now calling out Kamala Harris. And he's in the news today, believe it or not. Donald Trump Jr., he was asked today if he just might want to follow in his father's footsteps.
MAGA ideology is dominating the Republican Party now.
Yeah.
After President Trump steps down, would you consider picking up the reins? Would you run for office?
Here we go. Well, oh boy.
Oh boy is right. The issue that he says he's currently focused on at this moment. But first tonight here from the Hill, it was an hour-long spectacle today. President Trump with a claim, news clippings, and even a video in the Oval Office to try to back it up. Mick Mulvaney, Chris Stirewalt, Lindsey Granger join me in a moment on why President Trump decided to focus on farmers in South Africa. But first to our Robert Sherman tonight, live at the White House on what played out before the cameras. And Robert, the president said that there is genocide happening against these farmers in South Africa. His counterpart in South Africa said that's not the case, and they went back and forth for 60 minutes.
Yeah, certainly a big back and forth here today, Blake, with the president not backing down from his stance tonight that he believes genocide has and is being committed in South Africa against white farmers, also known as Afrikaners. In fact, at one moment, he asked for the lights to be dimmed and a video to play showing South African politicians calling for violence. The president of South Africa distancing himself from those comments made by the head of a different, smaller political party in South Africa. But nevertheless, the back and forth leading to tense exchanges like this.
But you do allow them to take land.
No.
You do allow them to take land.
Nobody can take land.
And then when they take the land, they kill the white farmer. And when they kill the white farmer, nothing happens to them.
South Africa's president acknowledging that there is violence in South Africa, but pushing back on the idea that a genocide is taking place in his country.
There is criminality in our country. People who do get killed, unfortunately through criminal activity, are not only white people. Majority of them are black people.
What the South Africans really want is a trade deal, trying to get one by even appealing to the president's love of golf. South African PGA golfers Retief Goosen and Ernie Els joining the delegation today, with Els saying he hopes a trade deal can move the country forward and better his homeland top to bottom. Blake?
Robert Sherman live at the White House tonight. Robert, thank you. Now, earlier this month, the United States granted asylum to 59 people from South Africa who are white. Today's meeting at the White House follows this fiery exchange between the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and Virginia's Democratic Senator Tim Kaine.
Can you have a different standard based upon the color of somebody's skin? Would that be acceptable?
Well, I'm not the one arguing that. Apparently you are, because you don't like the fact that they're white, and that's why they're coming.
I'm just asking you to say that would be unacceptable.
Well, no,
that
I would say that the United States,
a very easy thing
the United
to say.
States has a right to pick and choose who they allow into the United States.
Even based on the color of somebody's skin.
No one's. You're the one that's talking about the color of their skin, not me. These
You're
are people whose
refusing
farms were being burned down and they were killed because of the color of their skin.
Joining me now, here on the Hill, Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation contributor, former Trump White House Chief of Staff, Chris Stirewalt, host of the Hill Sunday, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and Lindsey Granger, NewsNation contributor. How about this timing? She recently spent weeks working in South Africa. Cool. How about that? Yeah. Even Starwall looks at you and says, how cool.
Thank you, Starwall.
We're going to get to that in a second. Mick, I want to start with you because I've heard from the president for 10 years about America First. And you could probably go anywhere across the globe and highlight something that you perceive as not right. The president today picked this issue. As Robert Sherman pointed out, they wanted to talk about trade. The president talked about this for an hour. Why this for the president?
Elon Musk.
It's just simply that. So Elon's been posting about this. Am I making news with
that statement? I mean,
do you think it's just that simple? I mean, Elon was there in the Oval Office.
And that's not unusual. I mean, it's senior advisors that all presidents have an impact on policy and priorities and so forth. So it shouldn't surprise anybody at all that they're taking this up. We didn't look at South Africa much, if at all, during the first term. You're going to look at it the second term, and I don't know why it's surprising to anybody. I also don't know why it's surprising where they thought that maybe Trump wouldn't raise this at the meeting today. That this trade meeting was really going to be about trade. Anybody who thought that just hasn't spent any time paying attention.
So you were there for weeks, and you were watching all of this unfold. I mean, this was a spectacle, Lindsay. They were going back and forth for an hour. But I guess one of your big takeaways from this is South Africa wanted to come in and talk about one thing, and Donald Trump clearly wanted to talk about something else.
Yeah, and I think as journalists, we look at information that we can vet and look through. And he pulled out papers, was sifting through them, and showed a video that we can't
there was that video at one point.
Yeah,
like, they came with not receipts, but close to it, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, the video is from what source? You know what we do in news. We check it. What is that? And so I think that we also need to understand that there are 19,000 murders in South Africa every year. 60 of them are farmers, and they're white and black farmers. You know, I think that we have to understand that the facts are that 81% of South Africans are black South Africans, and who owns the farmland, 72% of it is white South Africans. They're only 77% of the population. And so I think when we talk about this issue, we can dive all the way back to the origin of the apartheid and talk about how Dutch colonizers came over there and were in the land, and now Africans are trying to get their apartheid residuals back and try to figure out how to resurrect this whole issue and how they handle it differently than maybe we handle slavery in America. But I do think that there's a conversation to be had about what's not actually true. So if we look at the numbers, there's not a genocide happening there. And I think that this is just like a weird vendetta against diversity because Elon Musk...
That's what you think?
Yeah, I think that Elon Musk has a DEI on his mind, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's what they're doing over there is handling this differently. And so they're pointing to this fringe issue as an example of what might happen to white people in this country if we continue on this.
So both of them just brought up Musk. You think it's that simple or it goes beyond?
Well, I'm sure that's a huge part of it, and that Elon Musk, like a lot of people who are South African or the children of South Africans, what's going on in South Africa has been unhappy, right? The state of affairs in South Africa is unhappy. People are not happy with the direction of the country, and the country is divided along a fault line between more affluent white folks in the south and to the east, and then you have a predominantly black population. And is there a future where South Africa splits and that we have two countries there instead of one? Certainly that is true, but that's why those golfers and that's why the president was there, because they're trying to get this done. I will further submit that in addition to Elon Musk, there's another great reason for Donald Trump to have done this.
Why?
He's not having a very good run for his people right now, right? The budget bill is a mess and it's all screwed up, and it's going to increase the deficit by trillions of dollars. Increase the debt.
You're saying this is a look here, don't look there?
The concept of flooding the zone that Steve Bannon and others have talked about how well it works for Donald Trump, it doesn't always work with the normies. It doesn't always work with persuadable voters, but it certainly works for your base. When you're taking L's, you're in trouble over this airplane, the Congress is not responding to your demands. Here's something that you can do that is straight out of social media, is straight out of primetime cable news, is straight out of all that stuff, and you can say, but did you hear the one about the white Afrikaners who are being genocided? And you're like, off and running.
You think that there's something to it?
I think that there's also the whole layer of Israel and the stance that...
I'm glad you brought it up because it's a complicated relationship, right? South Africa is very cozy to Iran, and it's been recently hostile to Israel. So it's also a conversation of how do you look at that nation, right?
So South Africa took a pro-Palestinian stance in this whole thing, and so... As our ally, President Trump has always had an issue with that, and I think he's bringing that back to the table. But I also think there's a larger question about if we are, and you saw Tim Kaine blow up in that way, because we are allowing, at the same time, revoking temporary protected statuses from Venezuelans who are fleeing dire situations. How can we also say this non-dire situation by all standards and numbers are people that we want to allow in of one skin color? Like, the only difference that we see looking at the two situations is skin color. And so I think he's raising an actual real problem and a real question. It's not that we don't want immigration. It's that, how are you making these barometers? How are you making these standards?
So as that was happening in the Oval Office, something else was happening.
Yes, it was.
We're going to talk about something on this show right now that you're probably not hearing on any other show tonight, right?
Which stuns me.
Which stuns Mulvaney.
Whoa.
I think it was the first email that I sent to our team this morning. I said,
I should have checked my inbox. You're making me nervous.
I said, watch the bond market. And I said, watch the bond market because the White House watches the bond market, and that's why we watch it. And at about 1:30, when that meeting was happening, the stock market went straight down. And it was because there was a bond auction on the 20-year yield that had little bid to it. It was very weak.
Yeah,
And the reason why we're talking about it is because the last time that happened, Donald Trump reversed his policies on tariffs. And it just happened again, Mick, in the bond market.
Yeah, the financial networks covered this. Why more ordinary news folks are covering it? Because this is a stunning development. To have the 20-year go up by more than 100 basis points in an hour is, when you have to refinance $9.2 trillion this year, is really, really big news. And you're right, the last time we saw sort of a soft auction was the day before Trump announced the 90-day pause on Liberation Day. I'm not sure what triggered it today, because I don't think there was enough going on the Hill. I mean, maybe you think it was what's happening with a big, beautiful bill. By the way, if your name is Bill in this country, you've had a real good couple.
Yeah, this is great. Exactly.
Big, beautiful Bill, baby. But I don't know what policy they'd change other than going back and say, okay, we have to go back to the beginning on the big, beautiful bill and spend less money.
So what do you think the White House is thinking tonight? Because the last time we saw this, we saw policy change.
I don't know if it's too early to find out. Here's the question that I've been asking around and I haven't found out yet. Was this foreign buyers? That's what supposedly happened a couple weeks ago on the 3-year? And have all the foreign buyers of our debt finally said, you know what, we're not buying American debt. Keep in mind, and this is putting people to sleep, but Germany is actually issuing debt for the first time in a long time. They didn't do that forever. Are they now sort of sopping up some of the money that would go to U.S. Treasuries is instead going to Germany?
For how long a term?
I don't know how long the German term.
No, I mean the bonds that the
20
soft
years.
talk.
Yeah, 20
okay,
years.
so there's a good question. That's a good thought experiment. What is the likelihood that the United States of America will either A, partially default on its debts in the next 20 years, or B, intentionally devalue its currency to pay back dear money with cheap money? Now, we would have said 20 years ago, that will never happen. That will never happen. Well, I look today, I look at these jokers, I look at what the president says and does. Is default a possibility? Yeah, you'd have to admit the possibility.
Well, they're not going to default. You can't default when you own a printing.
We're going to get to Michael Schnell on the other side of the break here, member of the House as well, with what's going on. But we bring it up because the last time it happened, something else happened. Anyways, thank you all.
I think consumer confidence is down, too. We have to remember that.
We'll see. Lindsay, thank you so much. You two fine gentlemen. See you later in the show.
See you in a bit.
All right, still to come tonight here on the Hill. That behind closed doors Oval Office meeting. It was something we were just talking about. They can't figure out, Republicans, what to do next. So what happened behind closed doors? Plus, the state of the Democratic Party. What was it like standing with the president last year? I'll talk to one governor who vouched for his re-election bid. And Donald Trump Jr. making some headlines today, what he said about his future in politics. Welcome to Washington. This is the Center of Politics. I'm Blake Berman. The Hill is coming back in 4 minutes. Trump a little while ago wrapped up his meeting with the House Speaker Mike Johnson, other members of the Republican Party as well, to try to figure out what to do with that quote-unquote one big beautiful bill. The White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt telling NewsNation the meeting was, quote, productive and moved the ball in the right direction, end quote. Over now to our Michael Schnell. She's live up on Capitol Hill. I guess if there was something productive today, Michael, that would be news, right?
Yeah, it would be news, Blake, because we're really in crunch time right now. Speaker Mike Johnson has made it very clear on a number of occasions he wants to pass this bill out of the House by Memorial Day. Well, we are getting really close to that deadline. Now, I spoke to the Speaker after his meeting at the White House earlier today. He said he's eyeing a vote either tonight or tomorrow. Take a listen to what he told reporters.
We'll decide whether the vote will be tonight, passage of the rule, followed by final passage on the bill, or tomorrow morning. And we're excited. I believe we are going to land this airplane.
Now, it's a bit of an ambitious timeline because there are still a number of sticking points that need to be adjudicated. There's a state and local tax deduction cap. Speaker Johnson struck a deal with some of those SALT Republicans last night, but he still has to sell that to the Freedom Caucus. And then when you talk about those Freedom Caucus guys, well, there are still folks who are pushing for more significant cuts to Medicaid and more aggressive rollback of green energy tax credits approved by Democrats back in 2022. And then, of course, they're concerned about this package potentially adding to the deficit. So a lot going on in the Capitol right now. I can tell you I was just there right before. I'm heading there right after. Freedom Caucus members huddling right now together in their chairman, Andy Harris's office. We're expecting to hear where they stand on that bill when they emerge from the room. Blake?
All right. Our Michael Schnell live up on the Hill tonight. Michael, thank you. Joining us now is the Republican congressman from California, Jay Obernolte. He is a member of the Budget Committee. Congressman, thanks for being with us tonight. First time, I believe, here on the Hill.
It's good to see you, Blake.
You as well. So you just heard Michael there. She kind of laid it out, right? You got some folks who are worried about cuts to Medicaid. You've got others who say, look, you're just blowing a hole into debts and deficits. You're racking up a big bill. And you have others who say, we don't want these tax breaks for homeowners in blue states. Is it just pure negotiating at this point in time with the obvious end being you're going to figure something out? Or is it truly square peg, round hole territory?
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that there are good points on all sides. The Freedom Caucus, they're making a good point. The point they're making is the tax expenditures, the things that cost money, are going to be phased in first, the start of next year. And the cost savings that pay for those expenditures don't phase in until later under the current draft of the bill. And so what they're saying is that maybe we need to match those expenditures with the savings that pay for them. We're in a negotiation. We're going to get through that. The Rules Committee is still meeting. They've been meeting since 1 a.m. this morning. We understand a manager's amendment representing some of the compromise is going to be introduced soon. And then hopefully we will have later tonight a vote on the rule, which will trigger debate on the actual bill. And then we'll see if late tonight we might have a vote or perhaps tomorrow.
All right. You mentioned the House Freedom Caucus. Scott Perry, Congressman, Republican, Pennsylvania, is one of the folks there. Here's what he said earlier today. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Look, it's not perfect. No bill ever is. We understand that. We reckon we'd like to have more, but we recognize we've got a big conference in a big country and that the Democrats aren't going to help us.
Do you think they eventually back down? You think they eventually fold, I guess? And if so, on what?
I wouldn't put it as back down or fold. We're all part of the big team here, right? We're all fiscal conservatives. We want to get our country to a place of fiscal responsibility. We want to get our budget to a place where it's balanced. And the question is, how do we get from here to there, given the political dynamics within our conference and the different constituencies we all represent? So I think the Freedom Caucus are fighting for what they believe in, and I think we're going to get to a compromise.
How can you claim, Congressman, being fiscally conservative in President Trump's first term in the 2 fiscal years before COVID? He ran up deficits of $750 billion and nearly $1 trillion in year 2. And going forward here, so there's history there. And then going forward here, you're talking about adding another $3.5 trillion over the next decade. How can Republicans actually sit there and say, you know what, we're fiscal conservatives?
Well, we are conservatives because we believe that the way to get to a balanced budget is not to raise taxes. That's what the Democrats want to do. They would raise taxes and keep spending and spending and spending. We believe we want to keep taxes where they are, and we want to reduce spending. That's what this bill does, and I'm proud to say that I'm a conservative, and I think that this leads us in the right direction.
All right, we'll leave it there. Jay Obernolte is a Republican on the Budget Committee with us tonight here on the Hill. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Great to see you.
You as well. All right, still much more ahead tonight here on the Hill. The blame game ramps up. More Democrats blaming allies in their own party for possibly hiding the former president's health issues. Up next, I'll talk live. Joining us here in studio, the Democratic governor of Hawaii. And a live look at the White House right now, why Donald Trump Jr. was in the news today. You're watching The Hill. Stay with us. Welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. Just about 6:30 here on the East Coast. New revelations regarding former President Biden's prostate cancer. A spokesperson confirming the last time he underwent a screening for the disease was in 2014, 7 years before he became president of the United States. The news and timing of his diagnosis continues to raise questions really from both sides of the aisle now. For example, the former mayor of Los Angeles and candidate for California Governor Antonio Villaraigosa is the latest in his party to ask some questions. He blasted Kamala Harris and the former Secretary of Health and Human Services, Xavier Becerra, who's also running for governor, for potentially hiding the president's health issues, saying, quote, "Those in power were intentionally complicit or told outright lies in a systematic cover-up that kept Joe Biden's mental decline from the public," adding, quote, "Voters deserve to know the truth. What did Kamala Harris and Xavier Becerra know? When did they know it? And most importantly, why didn't either of them speak out?" The vice president, J.D. Vance, President Trump as well, also casting doubt.
It's very sad, actually. I'm surprised that it wasn't, the public wasn't notified a long time ago.
I don't think he was able to do a good job for the American people. And that's not politics. That's not because I disagreed with him on policy. That's because I don't think that he was in good enough health. In some ways, I blame him less than I blame the people around him.
Joining us now here on The Hill, the Democratic governor of Hawaii, Josh Green. He is also a physician. He's also today here in D.C. for a hearing about whether or not health officials downplayed adverse side effects associated with the COVID-19 vaccines. Nice to see you.
You too, thank you.
We always talk remotely because it's a little bit of a ways between Hawaii and here.
Yes.
We'll get to your hearing in a second, but I found what the former mayor in L.A., a Democrat, said pretty fascinating, right? Because he basically put a litmus test going forward of what did you know, when did you know, and why didn't you say anything? Do you think that's appropriate for Democrats going forward, if there was someone who was close to the former president, to ask those basic questions?
Sure, it's fair. I guess everyone's going to be getting a rectal exam and their prostate checked going forward, every guy, before they run for their next office. And people should get screenings. I'm a physician. It's tough. It's tough because people are piling on now because the president is, moved past his years of service. Of course, though, he should have gotten full screening. And
so if you were his physician, and you are a physician,
yeah.
Obviously for men over 70, there's a conversation. Should I get it? Should I not get it? Most men over 70, though, don't have the nuclear codes, right? And that's the difference here. So what would you have recommended to him?
Yeah, if you're going to be president, you have to have annual checks that include a PSA and a full physical exam, which would include that examination of the prostate, just because it is different. I mean, at certain ages, we do let it go because people who get diagnosed with prostate cancer at 75 or 80 may very well not even need treatment because they're going to die of something else. But in this case, if you're the president, you do have to have the thorough check.
One of the reasons why I enjoy talking to you, I find you just to be honest and forthcoming. You're always available, which I appreciate. You were on the show a lot during the campaign.
Yes.
I want to play one moment for you when we were talking about the former president's health. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Sure.
Do you trust his team right now, Governor? Because it seems like he's fairly isolated and insulated.
His team is extraordinary. His team delivered 3.5 years of great work.
Before I move on, do you feel duped in any way by the closest around him, the team around him?
I wouldn't use the word duped because I'm a nice guy. But
you think I'm not a nice guy for asking?
No, you're an honest. You're right.
So let me use a different word. Do you think they were? Do you think you were misled?
Not really, because I saw the president a lot. I do think that they did protect him, and obviously more than any of us, realized. And I'm just teasing. I'm gentle because I saw an elderly gentleman. I saw a competition between two old guys, and I thought they both had capacity issues in certain areas. But obviously, the president's decline was profound by the time he had that terrible debate, and now it is obviously something we should be honest about. If he didn't have full examinations, we don't know where his prostate cancer has spread to specifically. These are real issues because prostate cancer can go to bone, can go to brain, can go elsewhere.
You are in town from Hawaii for a health reason. Again, you're a physician. You testified up on the Hill today about myocarditis.
Yes.
which is, explain it for 10 seconds since you're the doctor.
Yeah, inflammation of the heart. And the question of this was whether it came from vaccinations or from COVID or the combo. And so we debated it.
So you debated it up on the Hill today. Here was some of your testimony, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
I will consider their different opinions, but I will tell you this. I will caution everyone that as we go down the rabbit hole of possibly moving away from vaccinations or vaccination programs, be very careful what you wish for.
So there was a question about whether the health officials at the time didn't warn fast enough, or they were delayed, I guess, to say, you know what, if you've taken the vaccine, there could possibly be an issue with myocarditis. Looking back on it, how do you look back on it at this point in time?
I don't think they were guilty of not disclosing information or covering things up. I think that was really a pretty unfair attack. Look, I was completely aware as we vaccinated people when studies came out, when reports came out about myocarditis. We were telling people that. I was treating individuals that had some complications from the vaccine, but mostly complications from COVID. And to be frank, about 12 people for every million shots that were given got a modest myocarditis, which resolved in its own in 3 to 5 days. Okay. When people had hospitalizations from COVID, we were seeing people die of myocarditis and worse all the time, and clots all the time. So the hearing today was interesting, and I have great compassion for those who have suffered any ill effects from any vaccine, including COVID's vaccine. But I think we were in the moment trying to make sure we didn't have mass death all across the country. And we did lose 1 million people. Yeah. In my opinion, it was good to vaccinate people, and I got vaccinated. My kids did too.
What about the FDA just decided limited COVID shots for only people 65 or older, or those with underlying health conditions? You agree with what they just recommended?
No, I don't. They actually are now limiting people's decision-making about whether or not they want to get vaccinated. They're telling us now only people over 65 or people with other chronic health conditions are going to be allowed to get the vaccination. That's very heavy-handed, and it's also causes some additional problems because they're adding extra criteria to do more studies. These vaccinations have to be adjusted every year, like the flu vaccine when there's other variants of the COVID virus. They're basically torpedoing mRNA vaccinations, and that was definitely the bias in the hearing. Although I really appreciated hearing afterwards from people that have had a stroke. There was a doctor on the panel that had a serious effect. So that's valuable to me. But if it becomes a witch hunt, which a big part of that hearing was a witch hunt, if it becomes a witch hunt and we start demonizing vaccination programs, and Kennedy is going to be bad news on this. We're going to have problems nationally.
I was going to ask you about RFK Jr. because he's taken on food dyes. Do you give him credit there?
Yeah, I love it.
Would you want him to come to Hawaii?
And ban some food dyes? Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, he can even tell me don't put food dyes in anything. He can work with me on pesticides. I've been fighting pesticide use forever, heavy metals. The thing is, he should have been the EPA director.
Okay.
He should not have been the health director because he doesn't know squat about health.
All right. Lastly, I ask this to every governor when they walk in, what's the big story in your state? And you said something interesting to me, which is related back to the wildfires in Lahaina. Tell me.
Yeah, so we are the first state, the only state to pass a climate impact fee. It's a tiny percent. It's a 0.75% increase in the tax for hotels and short-term rentals. It's going to go towards climate mitigation, fixing our beaches, putting up fire walls and fire breaks, protecting the environment, deal with climate change. We're taking a responsible approach to this large question of climate.
Have you gotten pushback from tourists at all?
No.
Because it's basically an extra hotel tax, right?
Right. It takes it from 10.25 to 11%. Okay. But people in general are embracing it because they say we want to protect paradise, and we negotiated a reasonable compromise. People want to save the planet. This is one way to do it.
All right. We'll leave it there. Governor Green from Hawaii.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. Safe travels back, right?
You bet.
All right. Talk to you again soon. Still to come tonight here on The Hill. Is it like father, like son?
So the answer is, I don't know. Maybe one day, that calling is there.
That, of course, Donald Trump Jr. asked today about a possible White House run. Is he the future for the GOP? Full panel, other side of the break.
Next time you want to share that big story out of D.C., make sure it's from The Hill, because TheHill.com is America's most shared political news brand for a reason. Trusted, credible, nonpartisan. Visit TheHill.com today.
Back here to the Hill on NewsNation, the center of politics as well, as we have discussed on this show. There are some questions regarding the direction of the Democratic Party, but there are also unanswered questions about the future of the other one, the Republican Party. Donald Trump Jr. said earlier today at the Qatar Economic Forum, when asked if he will be running for president at some point.
Here we go. Well, oh boy. Well, it's an honor to be asked and an honor to see that some some people are okay with it.
Those are just our friends.
Yeah,
in the front
that's
row,
probably
by the
just
way.
a couple
It's
people
like
we know.
the team. Those
are
like
the
three
tickets
people
we got.
yeah, that's it. Right.
You never know. So the answer is, I don't know. Maybe one day, that calling is there.
And the first son may have hinted at sort of what might he'd look at, what might keep him in the race, or what might sort of draw him to any of this going forward.
When we saw, again, the woke ideology that has taken over corporate America for the last, decade or so, being on the forefront of combating that insanity, I think is fundamentally important.
So he answered the question and then expanded upon it. What about it? Full panel with me now. Mick Mulvaney, former chief of staff in the first Trump White House, NewsNation contributor. She is the national political reporter for The Hill, Julia Manchester. Chris Steyerwalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and Dan Cannonen, former Battleground States director for both the Biden and Harris campaigns. How about this crew? Hello to you all.
Did you see my Steyerwalt impersonation?
I saw your Steyerwalt impersonation there.
I can't get past the vest.
I know. This is the full Steyerwalt.
He looks richer.
I forgot the bow tie. Someone outside said, if you're going to do Steyerwalt, you have to do the vest and the bow tie.
Next time.
You're feeling good here, cracking jokes. You feel good about Don Jr. and what he said?
Why not? I mean, look, crazier things have happened, but I think no one should assume that just because his last name is Trump, that he's going to, number one, inherit the brand or inherit his dad's support. I mean, Donald Trump is famous for not playing favorites. I think already we've had for a period of time, J.D. Vance was the favorite son. Now it might be Marco Rubio. Next week it could be Laura Trump. I don't know, but we're a long way from 2028. Stranger things has happened. It's not going to be the last time he gets asked the question.
So today, Catalyst puts out this data, the voter file data that we wait for months after the election to really understand what happened in 2024. And one interesting thing that I think is instructive on this Don Jr. question is where turnout was and where it wasn't. And you look at the Trumpiest, reddest census tracts in the country, there was a natural rise in turnout of about 3 or 4 points.
Okay.
In the most blue turnout tracts, it was down about 15% in some cases.
Okay.
And what I want to, the conclusion I draw from that is, as we all know, Trump has brought out almost organically these sporadic voters that have fueled, his election success. That has not translated in midterms or to other candidates. It has not been transferable, and I don't know to be transferable to Don Jr. And I do believe, especially with the sort of angst in this country, the polarization, the low approval ratings for Trump, there's a really good chance that 2028 will truly be a turn-the-page election again of the type we've not seen since 2008. And I don't think you want to be a Trump in a turn-the-page election.
You think there's something there with what Dan had just hit on and sort of those numbers?
Well, first, I mean, we know Americans love a political dynasty. They are they love it. It speaks to our national character that you can inherit the presidency from your father or husband or brother. Yep. And what better way to launch it than at the World Economic Forum in Qatar? It just speaks to where the American electorate always is, which is the sons of billionaires announcing their interest in a president. Yeah, it's just vibing.
I was actually surprised by Donald Trump Jr.'s comments. I mean, I wasn't completely surprised, but I thought it was notable because Trump Jr. has been somewhat of an ally of J.D. Vance and that part of the Republican sphere, along with Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, when Vance was running for Senate in 2022, that was Trump Jr.'s guy. He was pushing for him in that primary. So I thought that was interesting. But once again, Donald Trump, the president, has said he's not endorsing Vance for vice president. This is open.
All right, so that's one side of the aisle. I found it fascinating what the former mayor of L.A., Democrat Antonio Villaraigosa, said last night. He's running for governor in California. And he basically said, keep in mind he's a Democrat, what did Kamala Harris know? When did she know it? And why didn't she say anything? And he also, you could show the post, part of it. He also basically said the same for Xavier Becerra, who is running for governor in that state and was the Health and Human Services Secretary. He said at the highest levels of our government, those in power were intentionally complicit or told outright lies in a systematic cover-up to keep Joe Biden's mental decline from the public. And Dan, I'm just going to myself, that's not like some far-right conservative Republican throwing, all sorts of things out. That's the former Democratic mayor of Los Angeles, California. Yeah. Did he just sort of set the test going forward for any Democrat who was within 1 million miles of that Oval Office?
Yeah, I see him doing that. I think he's trying to stake out this position that has some righteous elements to it. I find it pretty cynical, honestly. I mean, my take on this...
Is it cynical or reasonable, I guess?
I think it's very cynical. And my take on this, which, folks can disagree or think that I'm blowing smoke on this.
Okay.
I wasn't a Biden person. I worked for Mike Bloomberg in 2020 because I didn't think Biden could win. Okay. Right? And I got on the Biden train later in the campaign and joined to help build that structure and then got to know the president in that context, late in the game. I wasn't an original guy.
Right.
And we all saw Joe Biden in the debate, and that's not defensible. But we all saw it, and we saw him at events, and I saw him in rope lines, and I was with him on the plane. And if there's a conspiracy to shroud him with just a handful of closer advisors, you wouldn't put a brand new guy in the plane with him. I just think this idea that anyone who saw the news reports, saw him at events, all of a sudden is like, oh my God, what was happening behind the scenes is so cynical. If you thought he was up for the job, great. If you thought he wasn't, great. But don't come at us now and say, we didn't know anything. That's just bunk.
I just love a little Democrat on Democrat violence. I mean, it's just, it's so nice to see y'all doing it to yourselves and us not doing it to ourselves for a change. So, look, where do you begin with this? It's going to be a Democrat governor of California.
Yes.
They're looking for an angle against everybody else.
Yeah.
I don't know why this is a surprise.
But take it out of California for a second, because when you start to think about, midterms, or not midterms really, but 2028, this is going to get brought up. Like, he just went there.
Actually, I do think it's going to get brought up in the midterms.
You do? Okay.
Keisha Lance Bottoms, a former Biden official running for governor of Georgia, she's going to get these questions. You have Pete Buttigieg, the former transportation secretary, who is thinking about running for president. Yeah. You have Biden's former surrogate, Gavin Newsom, thinking about running for president. I think these are questions that are going to be asked, within a Democratic primary, but also obviously in the general election.
If Democrats couldn't make January 6th stick to Republicans long enough to derail Donald Trump from returning to the White House, I think it is very unlikely that by 2028, Americans will still say, I want to dive into that Jake Tapper book and really talk about
what we saw.
It's so fascinating.
I've heard something about it.
It's so fascinating you bring that up, Chris, because I said today, if Trump was able to get January 6th happened, and if you would have asked it on January 7th if he was going to be the next president, I said, no way. And here we are, 3.5, in 3.5 years from now, are we going to be saying, well, is it sort of the same thing?
And I think to Dan's point, to take it in a direction that Dan might not have, I will say, cover up. Question mark, really? Question mark, question mark. There was no cover up. Joe Biden it wasn't like he went out and did that debate and people were like, where was this? He was a hale and hearty splitting wood with a bare-handled axe out there 2 days ago, and then suddenly he's this. We watched the decline. We watched it happen. We watched it get worse over time.
I still think it is an issue, though, with one part of this town, which is the media.
For sure.
And that is a real question.
The score settling going on over there right now is
but also the unreliability and the credibility of folks who were willing to look the absolute other way when their job is to sort
worse than that, though, then I'll shut up. But worse than that is the people who came after people who were credibly reporting, right? So Alex Thompson is one of the people who got cummed after. The Wall Street Journal took it right in the chops from other people in Washington, from other media outlets.
We talked about it on this network since October of 22.
Who were saying true things, and they said, how dare you?
Quick word, and then I'll leave it with you.
One thing that's notable, though, is, last election, it wasn't just Joe Biden. You have two men over 70 running for president. You look at the Senate and the House of Representatives, a lot of older people there. So I think it does speak to this larger question of, when do we need generational change?
Let me end with this. And just sort of flip it on you. A Democrat comes to you and says, Cannon, and I want you to help me out. I think you did the best you possibly could with a not the best hand in 24. And it's against someone who was in the inner circle of the Biden administration, how would you tell them to handle it?
If they were running against someone in the inner circle?
Yeah.
Do you play the card?
Buttigieg, do you play the card?
Oh, I see. Look, no, I don't. And not because I want to defend the inner circle or Joe Biden, but because I think, back to my first comment, I think that the best thing we can do is have a turn-the-page candidate, turn-the-page election, and that's what is best for Democrats in the country.
Gotta run. Thank you for being frank, sir. Appreciate y'all. Still to come, other side of the break, Buy Canada or Goodbye Canada. Despite trade tensions, I'm going to show you a headline from that country today, and it's my take on the other side. And coming up, Elizabeth Vargas reports they'll be heading down to Georgia, where a new EPA health disaster is unfolding after last year's huge chemical fire. That's coming up here in 6 minutes. My take, other side. Belief waving Canadian pride when President Trump launched the tariffs on our neighbors to the north in early April. Some Canadians then responded by pulling American products off their shelves. And in February, as Canadians weren't pleased about talks of a 51st state, then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau even taunted President Trump in the wake of Canada's hockey victory over the U.S. Well, forget about for a second the puck that dropped, because when the chips were down and it came time for Canada to decide what the best retirement investment decisions were for their citizens, Canada still believed that the best option remained south of their border. Check out this headline from Bloomberg today. Here's what it reads. Canada's Pension Plan Investment Board's total exposure to the U.S. market grew to 47% of its $516 billion portfolio. That's up from just 36% just a couple of years ago. The translation here is that the folks running the pension fund wanted more exposure to the United States in recent years. And that pension fund, by the way, grew 9% last year. Well done. So as we have noted many times on this show, one of the greatest investors in the world has known, Warren Buffett. He has repeatedly advised to never bet against America. The U.S. indeed remains the best bet in the world, and you don't even have to take Buffett's word for it. I guess you could say you could take Canada's. And that's my take tonight. I thank you so much for watching us here on The Hill. We'll be back tomorrow.